weight, maintain it with little to no effort, and never diet again? If that's a yes, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Perfect Gauge. I'm your host, Caroline Trickey, dietitian and eating psychology coach. And thank you so much for joining me today, where we're going to be discussing what to say when you talk to yourself. So you want to eat better, perhaps lose some weight, but have you noticed how your self-talk can get in the way? Your self-talk is that voice constantly chattering away in your head. Are you aware of yours? It's pretty hard to miss, especially when it gets opinionated or pushy. But most of the time, it's quietly buzzing away in the background and we don't hear everything it's saying. In fact, we don't even hear half of what it says. And no wonder. With an estimated 64,000 thoughts running through our minds each day, it's pretty impossible to catch them all. So we have thoughts, a lot of thoughts, also referred to as self-talk, running through our minds all day long that we're not fully aware of. And today I want to talk about how these thoughts can unknowingly stop you from achieving what it is that you want. And I want to talk about this because it's something I see all the time with my clients, and I've experienced it myself and still do from time to time. So we all have these thoughts swirling around in our heads all day long that really can take on a life of their own, and everyone has them. We tell ourselves stories all day long about what's happening around us and what we think about it. Sometimes these thoughts can be super helpful. They help us evaluate, critique, and make sense of things. But here's the catch. These thoughts also shape what we create in our lives. And the real issue pops up when we fully believe them. We don't question whether they're actually true or helpful. We simply believe everything we think, and it's here where things can go terribly wrong. When it comes to achieving anything, like losing weight, these thoughts can make or break your progress. You tell yourself stories about why you can't lose weight, and these stories feel so real, even when they're not. For example, you may be doing really well, eating when you're hungry, stopping when you've had enough, and then someone at work offers you a donut. You eat it, even though you're not actually hungry. No biggie, right? But then you start to tell yourself you've blown it. And then your thoughts become really self-critical, like, what's wrong with me? Why did I do that? Why can't I get my shit together? All because you ate a donut, which in and of itself isn't a big deal, but you make it one. You blow things out of the water. You tell yourself things that make you feel upset, frustrated, stressed. And next thing you know, you're eating another donut and telling yourself that weight loss is impossible because, well, you can't trust yourself, so it'll never happen for you. So can you see that it's actually your thoughts that led you astray? The tricky part is that we don't often realize that this is what we're doing. Most of the time, we come up with excuses and reasons for why we didn't listen to our body or we couldn't listen to our body and why we gave up. We convince ourselves it's about timing or that it wasn't the right approach, when really we've caused all of this from the stories we keep repeating in our minds. When you're trying to lose weight, one of the most common times for these unhelpful thoughts to pop up is when you're making a change, when you're doing something new. The brain likes what's familiar. It likes to repeat what it already knows. When you attempt something new and different, you'll find your thoughts speed up and get loud and cause you to feel anxious. Not because you're doing anything wrong, simply you're doing something different, unfamiliar to the brain. So if you find yourself excited about making a change, but then not following through, it's worth asking, what story am I telling myself? And is that what's holding me back? Because at the end of the day, those thoughts are just stories your mind has made up. stories you can rewrite. So here are some thoughts that my clients who struggle with weight, their body, or food have shared with me. It doesn't matter what I do, I can't lose weight. I've only got to look at cake and I put weight on. If I want to lose weight, I have to eat like a bird. My metabolism is so slow. I have no self-control. Once I start eating, I can't stop. I just can't get motivated. Or I can get started, but then something happens, the wheels fall off, and I can't seem to get them back on. Have you ever said any of those things to yourself, or something similar? Can you hear just how unmotivating they are? Can you imagine how telling yourself these things could be really unhelpful? Thing is, when we're saying those things, whether it's to ourselves or something else, we think we're simply stating the truth, the facts, because without questioning it, we believe it all. It just rolls off our tongues so easily, we don't stop to think if it's actually true. And the problem here is that it will become our truth, because what you think about, you bring about. Whatever you focus on grows. Remember last week when we discussed how our thoughts and beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies? What you think and believe, you will achieve. So your self-talk, that little voice inside your head, is what pushes you to take action, or, as the case may be, take no action. When we feel like we just can't get motivated, we can't get ourselves to do what we know. The tricky part, we don't always realize what's happening. A lot of our self-talk is fear-based and makes us feel worried and anxious. It has a way of blowing fears way out of proportion and holding us back from taking action, all in an effort to keep us safe. And this happens because your body feels every thought you think. Try it now. Think about something on your to-do list and tell yourself, I have to. So, for example, I have to clean the house, or I have to eat more vegetables. And check in and notice how your body feels when you tell yourself, I have to. I have to do those things. Do you feel relaxed, or do you feel tense? Really notice when you say, I have to. How does your body feel? Okay, now think about the same tasks and instead this time say, I choose to. So, I choose to clean the house, or I choose to eat more vegetables. Notice how different your body feels when you say choose. Notice how different it feels when you say I choose versus I have to. Any kind of fear-based thoughts will activate your stress response, that fight, flight, freeze response, when your body releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, and you can start to feel anxious and stressed, and those feelings fuel even stronger fear-based thoughts, and before you know it, you're stuck in a cycle. And all of this directly influences how you behave. And this is how you get stuck in non-action mode, where you're in the freeze part of the fight, flight, freeze response. No matter how hard you try, you just can't seem to get motivated. Thing is, we're wired for survival. If something scares us, we'll instinctively pull back from it. And yes, real obstacles do exist, but more often than not, the biggest barriers are the ones we've built ourselves. They're self-imposed, and we reinforce them daily with our own thoughts. Most of the time, what we're saying to ourselves that's freaking us out is about things that have happened in the past. Often, it's an exaggerated version of what happened in the past, and we're telling ourselves it's going to happen again in the future. And we're freaking ourselves out even though it hasn't actually happened, and so we get stressed and worried about things that could potentially happen. And then, ironically, those things do repeat themselves, but only because we're telling ourselves it will. Because what you think about, you bring about. What you focus on grows. And if you've spent months, years, or even decades convincing yourself to look out for all the reasons why you might fail, it's become so familiar to you that you often don't even realize this is what you're doing. You're so caught up in it all that you can't see the forest for the trees. You don't even realize that your reality is all created by your thoughts, and you have the opportunity to change it anytime you want. It's important that you know what you say to yourself, not only because it will be what's holding you back, but because your mind and body are intricately connected. So what you say to yourself affects how you feel. If you spend much of your day feeling anxious or worried, it's because your mind is filled with anxious or worrying thoughts. If you don't slow down and tune into your thoughts, you won't realize just how much you're talking yourself into things. Years ago, when I had a tricky relationship with food and eating, my thoughts about food were incredibly unhelpful. My mind was constantly spinning stories about what I should eat or what I just ate and how it was going to affect my weight and how I shouldn't have bought something or what I weighed and how it would never change because I couldn't trust myself. These thoughts were all consuming and created a loss of stress and angst about food and eating, and I was in a constant state of stress, which is not great for digestion or your metabolism. So what's your self-talk around food like? It's worth pausing to think about the things you tell yourself about eating or your body, or if you compare yourself to others, which is actually what I used to do too. What thoughts pop up in your mind? What do you tell yourself when it comes to food, eating, and your body? It can be really helpful to write them down. So often my clients are scared to do this. They're terrified of discovering what they're saying to themselves. But the thing is, they're still saying it. Those thoughts are still there. You're still saying those things to yourself. It's all there whirring around in your head. And remember that your body feels every thought you think. So it's actually a good idea to find out. And then when you do that, you can start to ask yourself if what you're saying is really true. Remember last week we did this with self-limiting beliefs. So often when something pops into our head, we straight away believe it as the truth. But more often than not, it's not true. Or it may have been true many, many years ago, but it's not true now. So go through what you've written down and see what's true. Then ask yourself, what do I want to think instead? And write down some thoughts that you can choose to think. There's a great quote from the book, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Dr. Shad Helmstetter. I can't pronounce his surname. Sorry, Shad. And he says, the human brain will do anything possible you tell it to do if you tell it often enough and strongly enough. So what are you telling yourself? And is it things you want or things you don't want? Because remember, the human brain will do anything possible you tell it to do if you tell it often enough and strongly enough. There's also a great parable I love where a grandmother is talking with her granddaughter. The grandmother says, in life there are two wolves inside of us which are always at battle. One is a good wolf, which represents things like kindness, bravery, and love. The other is a bad wolf, which represents things like greed, hatred, and fear. The granddaughter stops and thinks about it for a second. Then she looks up at her grandmother and says, "Grandmother, which one wins?" The grandmother replies, "The one you feed." So what thoughts are you feeding? And if you don't know, I really encourage you to slow down and pay attention to them. Anytime you want, you can observe them. A lot of us feel like we're at the mercy of our thoughts, but that's not the case. Start to observe what you're telling yourself, then ask if any of it's true. That in itself can often start to shift your thoughts. But also know that you can choose which thoughts to think. You can choose which thoughts to feed. All it takes is practice. Okay, so that's what I have for you this week. And join me next week where I will discuss what gets in the way of you listening to your perfect gauge. And as always, if you want to learn more or get in touch, you'll find a link in the show notes. And if you're enjoying this podcast, please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to. It will help other women find the podcast and help set them free from futile weight loss methods that don't work. And I'd be forever grateful if you did so. And if you haven't already, make sure to sign up to my 5-day Eat Consciously free challenge on my website, carolinetricky.com. That's tricky with an EY. Then don't forget to join me next week. I look forward to speaking to you then. Thanks so much, and bye for now.